Just a quick word of introduction. We were just so to have the week of Sheva Brachos, and there's always a question when you have Sheva Brachos, you need to have Panim Chadashos. And there's a big question, what's Panim Chadash? You have to have someone new. So Rambam says anyone, as long as they didn't hear the brachos. They know the person, they don't know the person, Chassan Kala knows him, that could be a waiter in the restaurant. Because a person didn't hear the brachos, and that person now is Chaim in the brachos when he sees this special event of a Chassan and Kala. Others say that no, it has to be someone that brings simcha to the Chassan and Kala. Now there's a new level of simcha, and because that new level of simcha the Chassan and Kala have, so there's a new level of shevach that you have to give to Hashem. It's fantastic. Shaila, we could spend an hour on that. Shaila, but not for now. There's one source I want to mention, the Ish Avraham, Izim Kodesh, on the Ibn Ezer says, the minhag in Yisrael is like Tosfos, that we have someone who would bring simcha, and therefore you have to be careful who it is. You have to have someone who the parents, the family, they know, and it brings simcha by having this new chashuv guest. And then Shabbos can also be considered part of Chadashos, not like the Rambam. And he says, you don't need to look for someone who didn't hear the brachos, meaning someone who was at the wedding and heard the brachos, but then had to run. So according to the Rambam, that's not a legitimate part of Chadashos, he heard the brachos. But according to Tosfos and the Rosh and everyone else in the Shulchan Aruch's Psak, that is part of Chadashos, because they bring simcha, because they're sitting for the meal. And the Ezim Kodesh says, Don't even try to be machmir like the Rambam. This is the minhag in Klal Yisrael. And why am I mentioning this now? Because to me, one of the great hallmarks of Rabbi Twerski and the Twerski family is keeping minhag Yisrael. How did the family, so many members, go out into the world, in the world of law, psychiatry, business, you name it, and stayed firm and so mechubar to the Masorah is because of that principle. There's minhag Yisrael, they're anchored, the levush, the Masorah, the minhag. So wherever they're going, they are anchored in the Masorah. And that was Sabashia. And started with the parents before, and Sabashia's generation just keeps going. I think it's an amazing, amazing Masorah that we all must embrace. Those of us that wear this kind of dress or that kind of dress, we need to be so anchored in a Masorah. When we go out into that world, that needs to be our ogan, our anchor. And I think it's so important because there's so many ideas and legacies of Sabashia, but I thought I wanted to mention this one tonight because this applies to every one of us. We're all out there. We need to hold on so tight, especially in the world. There's so much tumor out there. We need to hold on tight. And I'll mention one last point. 2 years ago, almost to the day, a few of us in the hospital, and we knew it was pretty much the end. And we made a neder, beli neder, that we're going to keep the Myers and the Twerski and the family connected. And it's very nice to say that, but what's going to happen as time goes on? You know, everyone drifts apart. It didn't happen, and to me, it's such a simcha. The families are still so tight. We still kept the Yom Kippur minhag going, even without Sabashia here, and having that angelic view of Sabashia and the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren around him while he's davening the Elah. That we don't have, but we still have the connection. It's from the families should stay connected forever. Mitzvah Hashem, keep learning and growing with each other. And now Mitzvah Hashem will start the program. More, thank you again so much, and thank you everyone for joining.
My father, Zechron Levacha, my father eschewed long speeches, so I'm not going to speak long. I'm going to be brief. There's a mission in Pirkei Avos. Reb Shimon Aimer, one of the things that they bring from Reb Shimon is Al Tehi Rasha B'fnei Atzmacha. The concept of self-esteem that my father was very focused on was not an original concept of his. Nor was it a modern idea. It was a popular thing at the time. It still is popular psychology to boost your self-esteem, think positively. But he was not viewing this as an original new development in pop psychology. It goes back, the Tanaim talked about it, Reb Shimon talks about it. My father believed that it's inferred in the Torah explicitly. There's a mitzvah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha literally only makes sense if there's an inyan of loving yourself. Only then could you ask people to love someone else as you love yourself. The Torah assumes that you love yourself. And the development of this concept that he had, he emphasized it again and again. He famously said that he thought all of his books were premised on this. My father wrote that someplace that he had a sign hanging in his office that said, "Birds fly because they think they can." And what he said that means is it's not that whatever you think you can do. It's not magical thinking. Yes, you think you can fly, you can. It's the opposite. Birds have an innate ability to fly. If they don't know that they have that ability, they won't fly. If a person doesn't recognize his own abilities and his own skills, he'll never develop them. The greatest artist, the greatest musician, the greatest composer will not create those works of art if he doesn't realize, or she doesn't realize, that they have that innate ability to do it. The Chazal teaches, Chayav Adam Leimer Masa Yigiu Ma'aseh L'Ma'aseh Abayisai. And it's famously pointed out that, yes, every single person has the capacity to be Ma'aseh Abayisai, going all the way back to the Abayisai Kedusha. They also say, Le'nitna Torah L'Malachi Yasharis. Hashem does not ask us for things that we're not capable of doing. We don't look at mitzvahs, we don't look at tshuva and say, we're not capable of doing this. Who am I? I don't have the ability to do this. A bird with this attitude, that I'm not able to do this, would not fly. And a Jew with the attitude of, I'm not worthy of being an Eved Hashem, will not be able to be Eved Hashem. The concept of self-esteem, recognizing what your abilities are, what you're able to accomplish, is a bedrock concept. It's not a new popular concept. It's a concept in the Torah. The Torah can only give you these mitzvahs because you have to understand that you have the ability to do the mitzvahs. You find this developed very much in the thinking of the Baal Shem. And it's a nuance. People talk about the Derech of Baal Shem being a new Derech. There was a shift in nuance, which was honestly not controversial, and these days it's not controversial. Baal Shem focused very much on understanding a person's neshama. The neshama is a chelik of Elokam B'Ma'al. The neshama has the God-given abilities because it has a divine source. And while up to that time, the primary focus of Sifrei Yira was to define the Yetzer Hara. A person has to recognize the enemy that he's up against in order to be able to deal with it. Sifrei Chassidus, and the Baal Shem in particular, was very focused on understanding the Yetzer Tov, not to the detriment of understanding it. You have to understand your enemy. If you don't understand your enemy, you could have the best army in the world and you won't succeed in vanquishing it. But if you understand your enemy and don't appreciate the ability of your own offensive forces, you won't be able to combat them. Chazal say, B'chol avavcha means b'shnei yitzrecha. There is a Milchama, there is a Avodas Hashem that involves both the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. And it's important to understand both the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. And my father Zechariah Baruch did not limit. My father spent a lot of time on the Yetzer Hara. He talked about understanding the Yetzer Hara. He spent a lot of time on addictive personalities and found in the world of addiction not a separate extreme or a separate segment of the population that's subject to addiction, but that the Yetzer Hara operates on a continuum that starts with desire and ends in addiction, and that many of the things that are applicable to addiction are also applicable to much more benign, what we would view as benign elements of the Yetzer Hara. And it's important to understand the Yetzer Hara. But he also pointed out that one of the devices of the Yetzer Hara is to convince you that your Yetzer Tov is inadequate. You believe it's what people refer to as imposter syndrome. I have this goal, I have this mission, and I'm doing this, and at some point I look back and I don't really believe that I'm able to do this. Again and again, the Sfarim talk about people having chalisha sadash, saying, how could Hashem want this from me? I'm just a basar v'dam. I have all of these inadequacies, all of these, I'm so bound to this world, I don't have an ability to connect to higher worlds. And the understanding of the Yetzer HaTov is that you do have the ability to connect with these worlds. If there's a war between the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, you have to understand that the Yetzer Hara's, one of its missions is to convince you that you don't have the ability to compete. It's interesting, by Hanachas Tefillin, there's a tefillah that we say where we ask that the tefillin, I think it's a play on the word, but Hanachas Tefillin, Hanacha is also to rest or to seize. And we say, V'yanichenu la'avodas Hashem kasher im levavenu. Levavenu is referring to the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, b'chal levavecha. Yanichenu la'avodas Hashem. Leave us, let us recognize that we have the ability to serve Hashem. This is, get rid of the Yetzer Hara, stop the Yetzer Hara. The Baal Shem famously said that the Yetzer Hara, he understands it, a Tosfos as hinting at this, that the Yetzer Hara is chayev, even though he's doing God's work. He's supposed to. The Yetzer Hara is supposed to try to tempt us. But the Yetzer Hara exceeds its mandate when it's soveya, when it tries to cloud the truth from us. It's one thing for the Yetzer Hara go against the Yetzer Tov in an equal way, and we'll see who prevails. But the Yetzer Hara, unfortunately, can convince us that we don't have the ability to do this. And this is where self-esteem comes in. Self-esteem is recognizing that these powers are trying to blind you to your own ability. And self-esteem recognizes that, not that I'm a great person, but that God created me with this ability to do something. It's a specific application that I just wanted to mention. It's interesting, the parashas we're reading by Yetzias Mitzrayim, there's Hashem calls on Moshe, gives him a mission to take Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. And then the Torah goes on to describe a whole dialogue between Moshe and Hashem. Moshe doesn't want to do it. Moshe doesn't feel up to the task. And it's clear, the question is, what is the lesson? Why is the Torah telling this? There's a lot of things in the Torah, a lot of things that happen that the Torah doesn't tell us about. And there's a specific, there seems to be a teaching in this dialogue. The teaching cannot be that simply that to show us Moshe's anivus, how humble he was, because the Torah tells us that Hashem was angered with this. Vayicharaf Hashem Moshe. Hashem did not want this type of humility. This was not the desired action. So what is the Torah showing us? It's said over in the name of the Chafetz Chaim that after Moshe went to Paro the first time, and Paro not only rejected them, but then made the shibud worse, Moshe told Hashem, Lama hare osam lama zeh. Why are you being cruel to this people, to Bnei Yisrael? Lama zeh shlachtani, why are you sending me? And the Chafetz Chaim said that this is to be understood, that Moshe was asking Hashem, why were you so cruel to them that you sent me? Sending me is bad for them. I told you, Moshe said, I told you I am not up to this task. And it appears an extension of this understanding of the Chafetz Chaim is throughout Chumash. And Moshe constantly goes back to Hashem and says, I don't know what to do with these people. I can't deal with them. This is an ongoing dialogue where Moshe is asking Hashem, please give this avodah to someone else. I feel inadequate. And the Torah seems to be telling us, I think, with this understanding of the Chafetz Chaim, the Torah seems to be telling us that this was a struggle that Moshe had, and we're supposed to learn from this. Hashem wants you to overcome this. It is normal to feel. You're being asked to do things that are on another level. It's normal to feel inadequate. It's wrong. It's wrong. The Torah is telling Moshe, Hashem is telling Moshe, think more of yourself. Recognize your own abilities. And from a practical standpoint, there's a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The pasuk in Tehillim says, "Karva el nafshi ge'ala," refers to redeeming a geula of my soul. We say similarly. There's a tefillah Friday night, "Shetrachmeni od begalusi legoleni." I am in personal galus, and I ask Hashem to redeem me. In addition to the general galus that our nation is subject to, everyone has their own personal galus, and everyone has their own personal geula. Everyone has their own personal Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Sfarim say that Adam, a person, is Osius Adam David Mashiach or Adam David Moshe. We all have this nitzitz of Mashiach, the nitzitz of Moshe Rabbeinu, that we employ to deliver ourselves, to bring the geula, to redeem ourselves in the way that Hashem wants it. And it would make sense then that with this nitzitz of Moshe, we find ourselves with this same struggle, saying, Lama zeh shlachtani. Hashem, I'm not up to this. You need someone good, and I'm just not up to being a spiritual person. Moshe says in Dvarim, Anochi Omed ben Hashem benechem. I am standing between you and Hashem. It's this nitzitz of Moshe that just as Moshe was able to persevere and succeed in bringing Bnei Yisrael ultimately into Eretz Yisrael, we have the same objective. And I think that this is at least the spiritual aspect of the element of self-esteem that my father was referring to.
There's just one point that I'm going to say before I actually start speaking, and don't worry, it's not going to be too long. Yes, I know, a lot of people are like laughing at this. We're in a learning center right now that was supposed to, that is, not just simply supposed to, but actually does spread, so to speak, my grandfather's teachings and ideology. But what a lot of people have done also, and this isn't bad, what they done when they came to speak here was they also tried to capture the essence, or at least a bit of the essence of my grandfather, which is a good idea. The problem is, I believe that, and it's not their fault, they weren't really able to capture the essence, because when dealing with somebody who is so multifaceted in everything, it's very, very hard to reach the end. But I do believe there is actually one main idea about my grandfather, which many people in the audience could actually attest to, that could actually capture everything. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant right now, so please stay hold, all right? My grandfather had 3 names: Avraham, Yehoshua, Hershel. Avraham, it's very, very easy to see the connection between the first Avraham and my grandfather. Kiyadua, Avraham, all he lived for, besides for spreading the idea of Hashem, was to give. The Medrash famously says that when he did the Bris Milah, Hashem specifically made sure that no guest should come, and Avraham almost lost it. He went practically insane. There's nobody for me to help, and that's why Hashem sent the 3 malachim in order that he could continue the midah of chesed. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the second name, Yeshua. What is so special about Yeshua? So at the very, very first parak of Sefer Yeshua, which we learn in the Haftorah, or at least the minig of Ashkenaz, is to learn for the Haftarah Simchas Torah. Klal Yisrael ended the Shloshim from Moshe Rabbeinu, and they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael. The land that, for all those who are here right now, this is the land that we're talking about. So first Hashem tells Yeshua, get the Am ready, get the nation ready, you guys are about to enter. Then I'm not going to go down the whole conversation, but Hashem says Chazak ve'ematz 3 times. All right, for Hashem to say that, I don't have any questions. Then Yeshua tells the Shodrei Am, the police would be a little bit of a different word, but the people that are in charge on the ground to get everything ready. And then Moshe speaks to the 2.5 Shvatim that Moshe told them to stay on Ever Yarden, that when Moshe made the deal with them, that they could stay on the other side of the Yarden, it was only on one condition, that they're coming to Eretz Yisrael for as long as it takes to conquer the Kivush HaOretz. Once that is completed, and also the remaining 9.5 nachlas are divided up, then they could return to their own nachla. And they had no problem. This was Moshe. This was just simply Yeshua fulfilling Moshe's command. But the last pasuk in the Haftorah, Perek Aleph, pasuk Yud Ches, the first part of the pasuk is not the Chiddush. It says, Kol ish ad sheyamre es picho, whoever will contradict your mouth, whoever will not listen to your words and fulfill the commandments, Yamas will die. All right. But then the last 3 words are the punchline, so to speak. Rak chazak ve'ematz. They said that also to Yeshua. Now it's very, very interesting. You go through Chamisha Chumshay Torah, well, to be more precise, from Shemos and on, nobody ever told this to Moshe. For the last 40 years, or to be more precise, 41 years of Moshe's life, they were not the easiest life. Moshe had to deal with a complete dictator. Moshe had to deal with a brand new nation who literally did not know how to be a nation, and yet nobody, especially from the Am, told him Chazak ve'ematz. So what is the difference between Moshe and Yeshua? What I'm about to say, I'm just putting it down over there. People I know people would think about this as being like controversial and all that, but it's actually very, very clear from the Pesukim themselves. In a few weeks' time, right now it's the first day of Parshas Mishpatim. In Parshas Kisiso, we're going to be learning about the infamous story about the Egel. Now everyone knows about the story of the Egel, but not too many people actually know what happened afterwards. After Moshe killed out the people that were over, that transgressed the sin of the golden calf, the pasuk says, Moshe yikach es ha'oil. He took his own tent, v'notaloi michutz lamachna, harachek min ha'machna. V'koroloi oil moed, v'haya kol mevakesh adonai, yetzei el ha'oil moed, asher michutz lamachna. Moshe took his own tent and moved it away from the rest of Klal Yisrael. Moshe separated himself from Klal Yisrael, so to speak. Not so to speak, he actually did. Why? The answer is because Moshe, he was the ultimate Jew that ever lived throughout history, and there's no denying that. But that caused a massive problem. There was no emotional connection between the Am and their leader. And that's why, when there is no emotional connection between one person to another, even if he's in charge of your own destiny, there is no words of encouragement coming from such a relationship. Who was Yeshua, on the other hand? Well, the Medrash famously says, why was Yeshua specifically picked to be the replacement for Moshe? Because he was the one that cleaned out the Beis Medrash and set it up after Moshe's shir. Now, if let's say you were to go to somebody in that time period, and you were to ask him, what do you think of Moshe? So he would obviously say, yeah, he speaks to Hashem Pe'el Peh, straight and whatever. But he's like, and what do you have with Moshe? He says, I'll be completely honest, I don't really feel like a one-on-one connection. But if you just speak to Yeshua on the other hand, he would tell you, oh yeah, Yeshua was one of our boys, you know. I sat next to him during Shir. I could speak to him whenever I want. There was an emotional connection between the Am and Yeshua. That's why when the nation saw that Yeshua was about to enter possibly a very, very difficult time period in his life, they tell him Chazak ve'ematz. There are plenty of people here in the audience here tonight, and I do believe that are watching abroad, that they had an emotional connection to my grandfather for one very, very, very big reason. He was on a different level than most of us. There's no denying that. But he also had this human quality to him that anyone that wanted to could just go over to him and speak to him about whatever was on their mind. Not only would he be able to approach my grandfather would have to have a conversation with him. There are many, many different examples. I'm not going to go through all of them right now in his personal life especially, but there are some that I could certainly say without a problem, especially since that they were publicized in certain Jewish Haredi newspapers. My grandfather loved children, really, really loved them. And when he was physically able to, until he was practically forced to be wheelchair bound, when he saw his grandchildren playing, so he'd be standing up, and sometimes he'd be wearing his bekisher even, his rekel. He would get down on the floor and he would play with them. There was no difference between a kid that was 5 years old and him, because he made sure there was no difference. In his personal life also, he wasn't higher than anyone else, or at least he didn't feel that way. I remember a few times, especially in the first year that I was here learning in Eretz Yisrael, the last normal year of really my grandfather's life, I was there practically every week with him, especially over Shabbos, as many members of the Gila of Menorah Ma'ar know. And plenty of times I remember just like, he'd be on the couch doing his little thing, and I would just sit down next to him and have a complete conversation with him. Most people you do not, especially public people, most people you cannot identify with that. They are who they are, and like they're just simply not approachable. My grandfather, not only was he approachable, he was connectable, which makes the fact that we're having a Yahrzeit program all the more painful. There are other examples. Unfortunately, my mind is blanking right now, but he was human. In fact, if you look at the Seder HaBriya, there's different levels in the Seder HaBriya. There's doimim, inanimate objects like rocks, sameach, things that grow, the plant world, chai, the animal world, medaber, the human race. Then you have malachim, which we know there are 10 different levels of malachim. I don't know all the details, but I'll have to take Chazal's word for it. And then the ultimate level is Hashem himself. Now most people, if you were to ask them, if you were to actually put it in a level, like label 1 to the highest level there is, you would say, well, there's animals, then there's humans, and then there's angels, right? The answer is not really that clear. Believe it or not, there are those who want to suggest that angels are actually lower than humans in one critical aspect. Hashem created when Hashem creates angels, Hashem creates them for who they are, and that's it. There is no change. And therefore, the Malach, the angel, fulfills its destiny or whatnot, and then it just ceases to exist. A human, on the other hand, the human is designed to grow. And you could see it. You could see babies, yeah, thank you, that are very, very small and actually more animal-like, so to speak, as my grandfather used to like to speak about. Then they develop more human. But then also when they grow up, if they're smart enough, they also develop their spiritual being. And that's what makes a human greater than a malach. Being human does not mean that you're stuck and you're a certain level, and we have to specifically look for people that are trying to be more angel-like. A person could be a human being and be higher than any angel in the world. And I really believe that's what my grandfather was. He was higher than a malach, and yet he remained the same human being that he was throughout his whole life. The one that tried to connect to people, the one that tried to understand people and help people. The saddest thing about my grandfather not being here is that we know there was never a human being like him before, and there'll never be a human being like him again. That's all, folks. Okay, that was the end of the speech that I was supposed to give, but more came over to me before the thing, and he told me that about a certain presentation, and I would like to say a very, very short thing beforehand, not going to be long. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rabbi Nachum Mendel Schneerson Zatzal, who my grandfather had a very, very good connection with, and my grandfather loved to no end, said in the name of his namesake, the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek says that in the Gemara, in the Yerushalmi writes that if you quote down a saying from somebody who's unfortunately not with us anymore, the Gemara says, Ki'ilu omed lefonav. It's as if he's standing before you. The Tzemach Tzedek says, what does it mean, Ki'ilu? As if. The Tzemach Tzedek says exactly that. It's only as if. But when you sing the niggin, sing the tune of somebody who's not here anymore, it's omed lefonav mamash. He's actually standing there right in front of you. By the Shiva, when I went to my grandmother one of the days of Shiva, so there's a wonderful couple here in the audience who's actually who were very, very close to my grandfather and also my grandmother. And I remember seeing him one of the nights of Shiva, and he comes over to me, and he told me, look, I've been to many levayas that they sang the body down to the Kvura, and I always felt like it wasn't right. But when they sang Hashia Samecha by your grandfather's levaya, I thought that was completely right. I don't know why. So I told him this shot in the Yerushalmi, and I told him, when somebody who's physically not here with you anymore is actually standing in front of you, you don't feel sad. There's no reason why to feel sad. He's actually there with you. The video that you're about to see was taken from my own wedding, which was in the year of my grandfather's Patira passing. It's only around a minute long, but I encourage whoever can to sing along, and that way my grandfather could actually be in this room together with us. Hit it.
There's a very famous Gemara from Sechta Shabbos Daf Kifni and Gimel. Rav, who was one of the greatest of the Amoraim, who's said to have lived even 300 years, is a shitta that he lived. He connected the generations from the Tanam to the Amoraim. He told his closest Talmud of Shmuel Bar Shilas, Achem b'haspaida, when I pass away, I want you to inspire people by eulogizing me. The Husam Ke'emna, because I'm going to be standing there. Now everybody will understand that Rav wasn't seeking the limelight during his lifetime, and especially not going over to somebody and saying, please speak about me and praise me, and I'm even going to be there to listen to that. It's a bit puzzling, and there are many ways to understand this Gemara. But one of the famous ones that the commentaries used to explain this Gemara is as follows. We know that a person, when he's in this world, he was created with Torah and mitzvahs, masim tovim, whatever good deed that he does helps him grow in this world. And this is what we are here for, as we heard from my cousin before. However, when somebody passes on to the world to come, somebody goes up to Shemayim, he becomes an oimid. He cannot grow anymore. The only thing that can help him elevate his neshama from one world to the next is if a person will seek to learn from what this person was, what he stood for, and become inspired and seek to emulate that person, and thereby become a better person. Hashem will say, okay, this person in this world is becoming better and growing because of you, so will your neshama be elevated. Everybody knows that my grandfather's friend of the Baruch, if he would be standing here, we would probably tell you, why are you guys wasting your time? Everybody go home, shut the lights. But he would have done so when he was here. But now that he's in the world to come, there's no question about it, that if we try to learn from who he was and what he stood for, and put some of his examples as a goal for us to be able to grow into, he will definitely return the favor to us, and we can all use it. I'm just going to be sharing a couple of his words and trying to glean some things from what he said to help us become better people. In the end of Perkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, that's a whole masechta that talks about a bunch of different ideas of us becoming better people. And in the 6th chapter, the Tana starts, before he even begins Mishnah Aleph, it starts, Buruch shabucha b'hem v'mishnusam. Blessed is he, blessed is Hashem, who has chosen them, our sages, and the mishnusam in our teachings. So my grandfather in Twerski and Chumash says there's a very important concept in moral and ethical education, which differs tremendously from secular education. The character of the mathematician does not necessarily impact the subject he teaches. It is different when the subject is human behavior, ethics, and religion. Blessed is he who chose them as a prerequisite to have a mishnusam. You cannot just go out there and learn from anybody. There are many books out there about coaching you in life situations, how you can become a better person, but don't even bother to Google the name of the author. When it comes to learning ethics, when it comes to trying to become a better person, part one is, who am I learning from? Let me make sure this person is somebody who he would be chosen by Hashem. If the Rabbi Shalom would have chosen him, at the Mishnusam, we could work now on part two and trying to learn from him. I think that everybody here will agree that we can all say, Buruch Ashabucha Boy. Blessed is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who has chosen him for the exemplary character that he was, the amazing personality that he had, what he stood for, what he presented to the world, and thereby, of course, as a Mishnusam, we want to go through his teachings and try to learn from him, to become better people. So there are two things, two ideas. Again, I'm not going to keep you waiting long, but two quick ideas that I think that we can relate to, and again, based on his own words. In Parashas Bo, he speaks about the sanctification of time and space. We all know that there's something called Kodesh in time. When Rosh Chodesh had to be, there were two witnesses who came into BenTzion, and BenTzion got up after they went through the whole process, and they said, Mekiddush, HaChodesh, Mekiddush. The month is sanctified. And that already happened from the beginning of time. Blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified that day. And not only is Shabbos Kodesh holy, but Shabbos spreads its wings on the 3 days prior to Shabbos Kodesh and the 3 days after. Basically, that means that every single day that we live in this world, every moment is Kodesh, is holy, is sanctified. The same idea is when it comes to space. We just read in last week's Parsha, the end of the Parsha, every place where you should mention HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, I will come and I will bless you. Chazal tell us that up until the time of the Chet HaEgel, it was any place in the world. You didn't have to come to Israel, you didn't have to go to the Kosel, to the Har HaBayis, to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Mishkan. Wherever you were, if you had the proper preparation, you were able to be zoicha to a tremendous amount of Kedusha. But that changed by the sin of the golden calf, by the Chet HaEgel, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and he limited it, the Kedusha, to one place. So in the words of my grandfather's friend, he says, although there was a contraction of the holiness of space, the sanctity of time remained intact. Just as one must have great reverence for a sacred place, nobody would think of doing something not appropriate in a shul, not appropriate by the kosel. You see, everybody covers their hair, everybody puts on the kippah, regardless of their religion and race and background. Everybody is careful when they walk into these places. So must one have reverence for time. It is forbidden to be wasteful of time. If one is engaged productively in the necessities of life, that is not considered bittul zman. That is not considered wasting time. However, wasting time is a disrespect of something holy. Being given additional time is like being given holy books. You would not take a sefer and throw it to the floor. And if it falls on the floor, you pick it up and you kiss it. Neither should you take some of your precious minutes of your life and throw them on the floor. They should not be treated with contempt. This is his own words. Now I can tell you what I witnessed personally. People knew him through the day, but we saw him in the morning and we saw him at night. I remember getting up in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning in Pittsburgh, and he used to be sitting on the green chair with a pen in his hand, and he was writing. And he was learning. And he didn't have a single moment through the day that he wasn't doing. He was just sitting restless. Everything was with a cheshbon. He even had a sprint in his step when he used to walk down the street. Whatever he did, whether it was a midah of zrizis. I remember him going to sleep at night. He had a pile of books next to his bed. He always fell asleep with a book in his hand. I even remember him falling asleep with his reading glasses on. There was never a wasted moment. I don't recall him sitting with a newspaper on the couch. It's not that he didn't read the newspaper, but he read it. Read it and moved on. He knew the news, he knew everything that was happening. But nothing bittul zman. Every moment was considered so precious. He realized what that meant. My grandfather's name was Avraham. The pasuk says, Avraham zukan buba yomim. He was elderly. When he passed on, he came back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all his days, with every moment that he has given. Everything was filled to the T. So what we can learn from over here and try to emulate in this sense is that if a person realizes, when he gets up in the morning and he says, I'm thanking you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shachzarta b'nishmusi, you returned my soul. You're giving me more time. You're giving me something so precious. And believe me that I'm going to try to be focused and use it the way I'm supposed to be using them. That's amazing. Do you know when somebody finishes a Masechta, in the world there was now so many Siyam Masechtas Nedurim, right? There's a party. Because you finished a Sefer, something holy. I think people, if they use their day the way it's supposed to be, before they go to sleep at night, you can party. You just made a Siyam on something that is so amazing. Every moment of the day is like a Sefer Kodesh, that's in his words. So that's one thing that we should realize. And I think that if a person goes to sleep at night realizing that he really used his time wisely, he'll be pretty happy. I think the depression factor will be minimized significantly. One last thing, I will end with that I wanted to share with you. There's a Gemara in Masechta Bruchos, and the Gemara says, if a person sees that he's being afflicted with pain, with anguish, he should do some self-introspection. Take some inventory. See, what is it that I did that I'm deserving of such treatment? What happened if he went through his whole inventory and he says, I don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing this to me. I can find no justification for that. You should attribute that to Bittul Torah. Now, the famous question is, if this person is coming back and he's saying, I went through everything that I did and I can't find any justification for Hashem, so obviously there was no Bittul Torah there, because Bittul Torah is not something that you could just push aside. So why are you telling him Yitla Bittul Torah? This is a very famous question. But listen to a fascinating answer from the Chidor. Many of you know who he was, Chaim Yosef David Azalui. Interestingly, he was born in 1724, he was nifter in 1806, he lived 82 years, and he wrote 82 books. Some similarity over here. So in the Sefer Maris Ayin, he writes something, and I'm going to say, he just says it in 5 words. I'm going to say it the way the later commentaries explained his words to me, and listen to this. It's very powerful. He says, we're not talking about somebody who was Bittul Torah, who's wasting his time and not learning. We're talking about somebody who's extremely diligent in his studies. And he's being machshav every moment of his time, and he has a seder in the morning and a seder at night. And he's sitting in shul learning. And a guy comes over to him and says, Rabbi Yid, I need a favor from you. And you're the only one who can help me. Please. And this guy says, shows him on the clock, Bittul Torah. I can't be mafsik, I can't help you. For every blat gemura that he's going to be learning now, will he pay with so much pain and so much anguish? Because you should have been mevatel Torah. Yet little bit Torah does not mean that you were not mevatel. It means you should have been mevatel Torah. Because if somebody comes and asks you for something, that's what you were created for. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of you. There is a thing called avodah zura. What does avodah zura mean? So people think of it in the form of an idol. Avodah zura simply means, my Hebrew is not that great, but everybody understands avodah zura means an avodah, doing something, right? It's zar. You know what that means? That means that if you're serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that He does not want you to do now, that is avodah zura. So in effect, when the HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts somebody to come to you, they should ask you for a favor, and He wants you to help him. And you're sitting and learning the Blat Gemara. It's a beautiful, interesting way of being over the avodah zura. My uncle Shlomo, who just spoke before, 2 years ago, sent me an email. There was a little excerpt of a book by Dr. Mark May, who's an ENT. He wrote a book called The Doctor's Spiritual Journey. And he was inspired by many people to become frum. And one of those people was my grandfather, Zechariah Levracha. I'm not going to read everything. There were a couple of pages here, just a couple of short lines. An interesting story. So he says, as I'm reading and quoting, Rabbi Twerski was there at the right time in my journey. I saw the real Rabbi Twerski, the man of Torah. On the Shabbos morning, Rabbi Twerski was learning with 11 of us, sitting around a long table in the Chabad shul. The building was previously a store. The place where we sat faced a large full-wall display window. We had a wide view of Whiteman Street up to the next intersection at Hobart Street. We were studying Yahrzeit the Seder for the week. Rabbi Twerski explained how to deal with a captured woman when the Jewish nation goes out to war. Suddenly, in the middle of a sentence, Rabbi Twerski jumps up, ran out the door, crossed the full view of the storefront window, crossed the street and headed to the street corner. There, the rabbi bent down and retrieved potatoes and oranges and an array of groceries that fell from the paper bags this elderly woman was carrying on her way home from food shopping. Rabbi Twerski returned, took his seat, and without a comment, continued where he left off. I found Rabbi Twerski's response inspirational. This man was the real deal, a man of action guided by Torah. My grandfather Zechariah Levracha was a person who everybody knows the great things that he did. He was a listening ear to the greatest celebrities, to the greatest politicians, and a havdil to the greatest Gedolei Yisrael. From every single sect of Klal Yisrael, Every single one. But nothing was too small for him to do. Just to be mafsik in the middle of a shiur because there was an old woman who obviously wasn't Jewish, on the way home from a grocery Shabbos morning, to pick up some potatoes and oranges from the floor. And not make an etzik about it, didn't do anything, didn't say anything. My cousin mentioned before, his name was Avraham. His midas chesed was something out of this world. He was never a person of great means, but the amounts of tzedakah that he gave was beyond what he was able to afford. He was just a person who lived for others. When he was a young bucher, his primary thing in life was learning Torah. He would always come to us later when we walked into his house, Tini, what did you learn today? And when we used to start talking about learning, he was far more versed in the sugi than we were, even though he hadn't seen this for the longest time. I remember when he was so sick, he was in so much pain, he had suffered something in his back. And we were Shabbos at his house. He was in a lot of pain then. I would have to go into details. When he tells me Shabbos after Friday afternoon, he says, Sini, I have a good word for you. But I'm going to save it for the Suda. And it comes to the Suda, he sat down there and he started repeating a vart. The name of the Sefer is Avedei Shivu. Go and look at the Sefer, it's very complicated. You got to be pretty brilliant to understand, be able to keep along what this person is saying there. You could see that while he was trying to figure things out and going along, he totally forgot the pain that he was in. He had a smile on his face, and he enjoyed repeating it in every chap. And then I turned around to him and said, Zayda, when was the last time that you saw this? He said, 40 years ago. Something doesn't stick with you for 40 years so clearly if you don't have a special cheshivas and a love for Torah. He lived Torah. He had letters written with the greatest Gedol Yisrael, the stipler. Somebody wanted to sell me a letter that he wrote to the Satmar. Every different type, every shape of color. I think you could go out there and take a look at that wall. Very interesting wall. I think it's a chiddush that's still standing. But when the call came that there's something else that has to happen in this world, he stopped, dropped, and rolled. He ran out and he went to school and he turned the world around. He shaped the perspective that we know as mental health today. But not only that, but he helped every single person regardless. He was there for others because he knew that was the call of every person in this world. Do not live here for yourself. You have to live for others. So I think the second thing that we can take from over here is that if every person, every day, thinks in the morning when they get up, is there one thing that I'm going to try to do for somebody else? Not for publicity, not for anything in return, just simply because I want to help my fellow Jew. If we're going to do this, and we're going to understand that we're going to be doing this without any doubt, he will definitely repay us. Just as over here, his whole goal in life was to help others. Chazal tell us that when a person comes up to Shemayim, what his life endeavors was in this world, he gets to do there, and of course even better. So let him continue helping us and having all of us in mind. We need so much rachman. Everybody, I'm biased, everybody is in so much pain. And we should be zoiche to have the Yeshia Gedoyle, the Vies Mashiach of kind of a matter.
Hi everyone. If anybody had some more papers for me to pull out of my pocket. Nobody went overtime, and my uncle, my cousins gave me some pretty large shoes to fill. And truthfully, I envy all of you, because the only reason I'm still here is because I was the last speaker. My attention span, when I'm not talking, is about, I would give it 30 to 45 seconds. And when I do listen to people speak, it's usually electronically, so I put it at least on 1.5 speed. So if you guys could find the button, that's fine, but I'll try to keep it quick. Okay. It's always a pleasure to be back here. I spent many, many memorable moments, as the rabbi mentioned, as the Mort mentioned, with my children here, Yom Kippur. Actually, right here, I think it was. And we'll always cherish those. And I thank you for allowing us to be here. And a special thank you to Rabbi Myers for tirelessly arranging this event and all the wonderful things he does. You should go Michael L'Choyel. To Rabbi Myers and family, who were so moist and nefesh, to honor Zayda, to take care of Zayda, to have him in their home, and the warmth, the care. And he should be Melech Yosher for you and family and the whole community. And Bubby, at risk of ruining what I cannot possibly express, we'll keep it to 2 words. Thank you. To actually get up here and eulogize Zayda is a daunting task. I don't think I'm up to that right now. But I think we could all try and learn something together. So, as everybody says, they're trying to learn from his life. We'll look for something practical to make ourselves better people. So there was a young boy who once approached his father, and he had this confused look on his face. It's like, Dad, is it true that man comes from dust? Oh, sure, of course. He was a religious man. Dad, is it true that we're going to return to dust? It's like, yeah, my son. It's like, Dad, I was just looking for something under the bed. And there was piles of dust there. Is it coming or going? There's something to learn from that. We'll get back to it. Zayda, as his father before him, would often tell stories as a way of teaching. So instead of just waxing nostalgic about Zayda, which we could do for hours, what time did you say we have to finish? Myers at 9. So I got 20 minutes, I win. Anyway, instead of that, we're going to try and learn something. I don't recall if I said this here or elsewhere. It may have ended up in an article, as my cousin accused me of before. But we know to review the known, as the Mesilas Yesharim says, is actually, can be more powerful than the revelation of the unknown. And so therefore, we try to focus on what we know and review it to transform ourselves into better people. So several years ago, I was here in Beit Shemesh, and I had the privilege to participate in one of the Myers family simchas. And it was several months after Zayda fell. And as Rabbi BenTzion, my cousin, mentioned before, Zayda was always running. I don't think I ever saw him walk. He was always running, he was on the move. When he had a walker, he would run down the hill holding his walker in the air. And he was in pain. He was confined to a wheelchair. And to put it mildly, he wasn't really doing that great. He was having a hard time. So we took our places at the table for the wedding meal. I don't know if you remember, it was outside. It was like on a porch. And we're sitting together, and there's 2 other fellows from Beit Shemesh sitting at the table, and they couldn't resist this opportunity. They're sitting right next to Dr. Twerski. The music wasn't loud, it was outside. And they came and they said, Rebbe, could you offer us some wisdom? So Zayda's quiet for a few seconds, and then he looks at them and he says, you know, you can see I'm confined to this wheelchair. And as you can see, my entire life I was productive, I was independent. I was able to help others. I can't do that on my own anymore. My grandsons are helping me. I can't produce what I used to produce. I'm having a very hard time with it. I can't do things on my own. He said, for the past several months, I've been asking myself, what is the purpose of this? And he wrote about this. What am I supposed to be doing now? He said, recently I came to realize, I was sitting there when he said it, then later I saw him write in the book. This is what Hashem wants from me right now. He wants me to try, serve him from this position that I'm in, to try and do it b'simcha. As difficult as it may sound. That was his response. Zayda struggled as all humans struggle. He was a great man, he was a famous man, he struggled. And he spent hours, I remember seeing this, anyone in the family can testify, he spent hours poring over this farm about Yisurim, about suffering. He's trying to make sense of it, trying to find meaning, trying to find direction. And he wrote about it in his last book, and I'm going to read something to you that he wrote, because in his words it's best. It's very short. Sitting in front of my bookcase, I reached for one of the books I wrote. Simcha, it's not just happiness. After reading the first few chapters, I thought, if this book had been written by a Rebbe, I'd quickly make my way to him for guidance. Being that I'm the author, I'm at a disadvantage. The Gemara says a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. He was in trouble. And I think there's something very powerful that we can learn from this. Zayda was open, he was honest with himself, he searched for truth, he searched for meaning. He had good days, he had bad days. Easier days, harder days. He didn't deny it. He tried his best, though, to learn from his life and from his life experiences, and he tried to grow from them. Sometimes successfully, and sometimes not, and that's okay. And I think that's the lesson. Every single person that is sitting here in this room, anybody that's online with us or will watch this 10 years from now, has something difficult going on in their lives. Some more difficult than others, but there's nobody that has this perfect, what's the right word, utopia maybe? It's not all rosy. That's life. The question is, what do we do with ourselves, and what do we do with our lives when we're in these situations? Are we honest with ourselves? Do we try to focus inward, see where we're holding and how we approach it? Or do we retreat into a world of denial and blame? It's a lot more comfortable, but it's not going to help us get out of it, and it's not going to be a catalyst for growth. Zayda taught us through his teachings, but even more so through his life, that we can be honest with ourselves, we can face our problems, we can try to grow from them. I'm almost finished, guys. So I'm sure you all know by now about Zayda's pet lobster, right? He had many lobsters throughout his life. I think it's actually his most viewed clip that's out there. He had many lobsters throughout his life, and at the end of his life, his health was one of them, and he tried to use them for growth. So going back to our little boy that was looking under the bed, are we coming or going? What are we doing? He was trying to grow. And I'd like to conclude with this story that I heard from a relative of Zayda's, the Rebbe from Barbara, Rabbi Yahrzeit Twerski, who himself needs a refuah shleima. When I was going through one of my lobsters, so I came to him for advice, and he told me a story about one of the great Hasidic masters, Rabbi Myers, who happened to be one of the Rebbe's Zayda was very fond of. He would quote him very often. So Rabbi Myers was famous for pidin shvuyim, for redeeming people from prison. But he also had this small group of Talmidim, the Chavraya as they call it, that would sit and learn from him in the Medrash. And one of these major, outstanding students of his was going through a hard time. He was still there in the Medrash, he was sitting with his Chabura, with his friends, but he wasn't feeling it. He felt completely disconnected, he didn't feel his avodas Hashem, and he was really in a rut. He was in a very bad place. This went on for a while, and when the Rebbe finally, the Rebbe was made aware of this, or he noticed it himself, he came over to this Yid and he said, "Tell me, can I ask you for some advice?" The Rebbe wants my advice, of course, he jumps up. The Rebbe said, "I'm traveling through a dark, thick forest, and this bandit jumps out at me, knocks me to the floor, and he's beating him up and he wants to rob him. What should I do? Should I remain laying down on the floor, allow him to attack me? Or should I try to get up, escape, fight back, something?" I said, "Rebbe, what's the question?" "Of course. Try, struggle, do something. You're laying there, you're saying you're as good as dead." "Yeah, okay, thanks." And the Rebbe walks out. And the Chassid thinks, "Well, that's what the Rebbe had to ask me?" And then it hit him. He's talking to you. He knocked you down, and you're just laying there. get up. And I think that this story is the continuation of what we were just discussing. We struggle, we get knocked down. It's going to happen to all of us, hopefully not that often. The question is, when we're laying there, do we try to get up and learn from our mistakes, or do we stay down? Thank you.